The rum we're looking at today is simply named the Fortress Rum after the Fortress of Louisbourg on Ile Royale, which is now Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia, which of course makes it a Canadian rum. And that's where the barrels of rum were supposedly aged. Now, I actually don't remember where I got this bottle. I know that I tasted it in 2022 in London at the rum stocked house of Indian Jazz Singh, who are my very good friends from Skylark Spirits over there. But I do have a bottle in Toronto as well, and you might notice that there isn't very much left of this thing, and that's because my little brother, in whose house I'm taping this, he disliked it so much that he just kind of like uses it as a general purpose mixer, and he just kind of like takes it down because there's just nothing that he feels like drinking when there's cheap booze around. So that tells you a lot about what your average man in the street who isn't a rum aficionado likes about it. Now, let's talk about the rum a little bit. Now, the back label of the rum says that it's made in Canada from domestic and imported ingredients without any further qualification. And the website of the Fortress Rum talks about select Caribbean rums, no further elaboration, and it's aged in oak barrels, but doesn't say what kind of oak barrels. So we're going to assume ex-bourbon, and it doesn't say for how long. Now, this is a company that is called Authentic Seacoast Distilling Company Limited, which has its fingers in all sorts of different pies: beer, vodka, coffee, rum cake, hand sanitizers, soaps, and for good measure has associations with small inns and hotels in the area in a sort of like a one-stop hospitality enterprises. But the thing is, with all of that advertising, we really don't know very much about the rum. We don't know where the Caribbean rums come from, how many of nations or islands are involved in this province, how old they are, how long it's been aged. There is a feeling I have that the rum is actually probably mixed with a small amount of locally distilled rum, because the website does show a single column still in the photo archive, but that's maybe is why the label mentions domestic ingredients. The aging is supposedly taking place in the island, but again, no further information is provided. Most comments that I've seen on this rum, and there aren't very many, are on Reddit and social media. And most people say that it's kind of like a decent Canadian rum, or kind of an okay sipper. And it shares similarities and compares well against rums such as, for example, Ironworks. And it's available mostly in Ontario and the Maritimes. It's about $56 right now on the LCBO, which is the Ontario Liquor Monopoly. And as one other factoid, the webpage is at pains to mention that it won a lot of medals between 2015 and 2018 at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. Well, I have my own opinion on the usefulness and contribution of spirits competitions, which is a whole nother long opinionated screed that I've never bothered to post, but I have some opinions on. But as far as I'm concerned, this is another case where the restricted rum selection available to Canadians, which is caused by and directly attributable to provincial monopolies dating back to Prohibition times, has so limited the ability of most people to taste world-class rums, such as the kind that you can find elsewhere in the world, that even a subpar product like this, yes, I say subpar, can tout medals, and which mean very little, as some kind of evidence of enormous success. And, it can never be corrected by anybody else. But the problem is, it really isn't that good a rum at all. So let's take it apart then, and I'll explain my chain of reasoning. Now, I know nothing about the rum itself, aside from what I've given you here, and the strength, which is 45%. That by itself would lead you to believe, oh yeah, that's not too bad. Of course, you don't know how old it is, right? Now, the rum is decent enough. It's fruity, it's tart, it's got some yogurt, vanilla, some strawberries, and some very light citrus notes. Surprisingly enough, the 45% doesn't actually make much of a statement for itself. It's okay, but nothing really. There's some bubblegum, and there's some cherries, and there's some more vanilla, and a touch of leather, and a very, very faint bitterness of tannins, and more vanilla. There's really too much of this nonsense. Initially that taste was kind of laid back and it didn't really go very far, but gradually it starts to dominate the nose in a way that I don't think is healthy. Now, it's a good strength for an unpretentious rum, which this is. So there's some mellow fruitiness when you taste it, ripe apples, red cherries, cranberries, that kind of thing. It's backed up by vanilla, acetones, a tiny bit of faint furniture polish and varnish, and then there's some salt caramel. There's a very slight minerality of charcoal, and bloody hell, there's just more vanilla. You know, a lot of the stuff that's more interesting starts to get subsumed here and overwhelmed by that. And the finish gives a little hint of more, some fruit, cinnamon, vanilla, and green tea, but then it just vanishes with a whisper, and you're really not getting very much there. So the Fortress rum, to some extent, suffers from that issue that I've remarked on before, which is that it's sharing its production with too many other spirits, so nobody who's involved in the production of this thing gets any time to do any one thing right and really get into the deep diving of making it a world-class piece of work. And as a rum itself, just taken by itself, it fails on all sorts of other levels, right? There's the lack of information provision. It's indeterminate in taste. Yes, there's some stuff there, and the proof is really nice, but that vanilla is just too much, and it's far past the point of being reasonably provided by the barrel aging. And that's why my notes that I had here, dating back from whenever, because I've tasted it 2 or 3 times now, have this big mark on the page asking, well, has there been some additives to it? And the more I think about it, that's what I think they did. It's nice, but only up to a point. Less is really more in a case like this. And like excess sugar in rums, and I don't think this is particularly sweet, so I don't think that's what the case is, such spices or other stuff that is being added, and remember, I have no evidence of this aside from my tasting, it hides taste elements that could be more assertive and much more interesting if allowed to get out there and shine. And that's what the weakness of this thing is. And we are not allowed to judge that. That's an issue I have. Somebody out there went out there and decided that for us, the natural profile of this unknown distillate of an unknown set of stills and an unknown source location, as changed by unknown barrels for an unknown period of time, it needed boosting. Why? I don't know. They chose to call what they did authentic, which rather than provide the data that we would need on what the rum is actually made of, where it's from, and how it's made up. In other words, like really authentic information. The upshot is that they ended up with a distilled sow's ear, while they pretended somehow that they had succeeded in making a silk purse. This is an issue I have with far too many rums that tout themselves as something that they're actually not. And the problem I have with this is that it leads people to believe that what they're getting is something actually really good when the opposite is truly the case. I think more information should be provided. I think that we should be allowed to judge the rum on its own merits without any kind of fancy additions. And the thing is, at 56 Canadian dollars, I think it's too highly priced, because honestly, I think this is like between 2 and 5 years old. It's a blend, and it just doesn't do the job that it's meant to do. But it will get you drunk. I mean, if that's all you're after, then of course this is exactly what you want. I'm going to leave it there for now. The review that I have already written scored this at 73 points. I see no reason whatsoever to change that. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you buy it, let me know what you think. If you have a difference of opinion and you think it's better than I do, then by all means, leave me a comment. Otherwise, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.